U.S. markets trading higher on Wednesday after Greece's Prime Minister signaled he was prepared to accept the ECB, the IMF, and the other European creditors' bailout offer with some conditions. Joining us from his office in London is Holger Schmieding, chief economist at Berenberg. Holger, thank you so much for joining us.
A pleasure, yes.
Now, will European officials take these latest requests seriously, given that there's a national referendum set to take place on Sunday on whether creditors' proposals should be accepted, and it looks like the Prime Minister is urging voters to vote no?
This all sounds a bit like a farce. First of all, Greece has now asked for the extension of a bailout, which no longer exists. It did expire last night, so this comes far too late. On top of that, Greece has called a referendum, and the Prime Minister is campaigning for a no to Europe in the referendum. So the response, at least from many parts of Europe, including Berlin, is that we first need to get through the Greek referendum. And then if the Greek in the referendum were to say yes to Europe against the advice of their Prime Minister, then negotiations could start again.
Now, it appears, though, that the Greek Prime Minister wants a third fund in the amount of 29 billion euros. What would that money be used for, and would it be a case of basically just kicking the can down the road?
The money which the Greek Prime Minister has requested would be to service Greece's domestic and especially external debt. That is to pay the International Monetary Fund, to pay the European Central Bank, to pay other creditors of Greece over the next 2 years. It would not be used for domestic purchases. Well, whether that would be kicking the can down the road or not depends on how Greece would use such 2 years. If it were to return to the ultimately successful policies of the last government, to the policies which got the Greek economy growing again last year, then it would be a solution. But if Tsipras just wants to buy time for the own left-wing policies to continue to push Greece into a deeper recession, then of course this would not help at all.
Now, we've got Eurozone finance ministers meeting to put basically more pressure on Greece by restricting their access to emergency loans. What impact could this have on the country's banks and the Greek people's access to funds?
Well, the European Central Bank has already, over the weekend, refused to raise the limits for excess liquidity, for emergency liquidity to Greece. As a result, the banks are closed. And I do think that the European Central Bank today will take no decision that would allow Greek banks to reopen over the next few days. Instead, there is a risk that the ECB will have to respond to the end of the bailout by tightening liquidity conditions for Greek banks, and hence by making it even more difficult for Greek banks to reopen again next week.
So, in your opinion, will the ECB allow the Greek banks to fail?
The ECB probably will have no choice but to allow the Greek banks to fail, but that will depend very much on the outcome of the referendum. If that is a no to Europe, that is, if that is a no to the euro, then the ECB, as the one supplying euros, could no longer work very much with the Greek banks. Then the Greek banks would have to fail. If the referendum is a yes, and then a Greek government implements the yes, then of course the European Central Bank could continue sending euros down to Athens. It could ease the plight of the Greek banks, and it could then help the Greek economy to get back onto its feet.
Now, you say that amid the economic chaos, the Greek government could finally implement all the Venezuelan-style lunacies of its program. Would this further isolate the country from its neighbors?
Yes, if Greece now were to choose no to Europe, no to the euro in a referendum, if Syriza stays in power, if without the oversight through external creditors, Syriza could then really implement all of its left-wing program, then we see in Venezuela into what kind of economic situation that would lead. That would indeed isolate Greece badly in Europe. It would be extremely bad news for the Greek people. I don't think it would come to that, because probably at some point in the process, the Greek population would wake up to the risk and prevent that. But we now face the situation where if Greece were to say no to the euro in the referendum, it might first go down further the Venezuelan way, because before it then may still change course.
Holger, a story that's continuing to develop. We'll keep an eye on it. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That was Holger Schmieding, chief economist at Berenberg, joining us from London. In New York, I'm Ruben Ramirez, and you're watching The Street.